Let's hope this works. Please let this work.
It says that it's streaming live now on Facebook.
Oh, you see it?
I saw the notification.
All right. So, good evening and welcome to another one of our weekly series during this month of mental health awareness. Tonight's topic is on Let's Talk About OCD Becoming Unstuck. And to lead out in our presentation tonight, we have Alicia Wright and Ashley Dean, um, interns of Sound Living Counseling Center, who will soon go on to becoming counselors at Sound Living Counseling Center. So they'll be sharing their wisdom with us this evening on the topic of OCD.
Thank you so much, Tracy Ann, for that introduction. So to get started, I'm going to share my screen so that we can get right into our presentation. Okay, so tonight we'll be talking about OCD, and we will also be discussing how to become unstuck from this thought of OCD. So to begin with, we're going to kind of discuss what is OCD. And OCD stands for Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and it's a disorder that in which people have recurring unwanted thoughts, ideas, or sensations that we can see as obsessions, and they make individuals feel driven to do something repetitively to get away from these obsessions, and we would call these compulsions. Now, obsessions versus compulsions is obsessions is thoughts or worries that will pop into someone's mind and will not go away. It'll be false alarms in the brain that cause distress and anxiety. Compulsions or rituals are things that are done ritually to make obsessions go away. They're unable to be stopped no matter what the individual would like to happen. And it causes distress when they're unable to do these rituals or obsession or compulsions, and if someone tries to stop them from committing them. Now, types of obsessions are worries about germs, getting sick, dying, saving or hoarding things that they may not need, being worried about doing something wrong, or feelings that things must be just right. Types of compulsions or rituals can be washing or cleaning of their hands, their body, surfaces, starting things over, as in rewriting things, beginning things if something happens and they're stopped from doing it, doing things evenly, as in sometimes for those who have OCD, there's a good number or a good color and a bad number and a bad color. And hoarding, which sometimes they feel as if they hold on to something, that thing might help them with their obsessions or help with their compulsions or rituals. Tapping on something, touching anything, praying away harm or praying away things that bring them distress, counting, as in maybe counting in a good number, or confessing and apologizing for reassurance. So we're going to use this little diagram to kind of see how OCD can sometimes work. Now we have thoughts, and those thoughts could be like, oh, if I do something, it's my fault. And those thoughts can lead to a feeling. And the feeling could be, confusion or sadness, hopelessness, guilt. And then those feelings can lead to an action. And sometimes that action can be counting repetitively in their mind, or constantly tapping their foot, or doing something that they feel like will remove the obsession or something that could be happening to them. And as you can see, these thoughts and these actions and these feelings can kind of bounce off each other. So their thoughts can come from their feelings, or their feelings can lead to their thoughts, or their feelings can lead to an action, or action can lead to the feelings. So them having a thinking process of guilt could lead to the compulsion or the action that is happening to them. And it's an unending cycle that doesn't basically stop. And as we're presenting, please, if you have any questions on Facebook or in our live, please leave them and we will answer them. Now, we also want to describe kind of like what OCD isn't. And sometimes when some people think of OCD, they consider somebody who's superstitious. And one example we can think of when we think of superstition is somebody who thinks breaking a mirror is bad luck. Yes, there is a ritual of sometimes avoiding the break in the mirror or doing something after they cause the bad luck. But the difference is in someone who has OCD is they obsess over this idea of breaking mirrors and how it causes them bad luck or causes bad things to happen. And this obsession leads to these recurrent and intrusive and unwanted thoughts, which then leads them to start rituals of counting or doing an action that helps relieve them from this distress or worry. And superstitions are not always recurrent. And also, the person who's OCD will have these recurrent and obsessive thoughts of breaking mirrors, even when a mirror is not present. And so that's how we can kind of sometimes see the difference between someone who's superstitious and someone has OCD. And also, we think sometimes when we see someone who is very neat or organized, we say, oh, you're just very OCD over something. And that is not always the case because someone who's very neat may not always be OCD. Because when someone who is experiencing or going through OCD, when something is dirty or they think they see chaos in places where they like, um, neatness or organization, it causes such a strong, intense distress and it overwhelms their life and it takes over and it creates them to have to do actions or things that kind of remove these obsessions, remove these unwanted thoughts. And so for someone who just likes things to be a certain way, there's not always that unneeded, there's always that overwhelming distress. And also, it's not a quirk, something that they can get away very easily, or it's something that they can just, throw away. It's not always they just like something that needs to be a certain way. It's something that it has to be this way because of a distress that they're feeling, and something that is taking over their life. And OCD, sometimes when we think of it, we shouldn't just use it plainly when we see somebody a certain way. It's like, oh, you're just OCD, because OCD goes to something so deeper than that. And this is why it's so important that we are discussing this and the month of mental health awareness, because mental health is such an important topic and idea. So we really wanted to kind of give you a background on OCD and the um, the things that make it. And so we want to now go on to kind of becoming unstuck. And for this part, my colleague Ashley Dean will take over this part of the presentation.
So, with becoming unstuck, one part of helping individuals with OCD is understanding what it is and how to work with individuals who have OCD. And Alicia gave us a little bit of what is OCD earlier and kind of some of the myths or superstitions around that. What I'm going to go into next are some common um, obsessions or compulsions of OCD that counselors may look for or keep an eye out for if they see it. So there are three common obsessions slash compulsions of OCD that counselors may be aware of or that you might see in someone who does have OCD. The first one is harmful OCD. And the obsessions are usually unwanted thoughts or fears of harming others or harming themselves. Usually, like with more suicidal thoughts that is centered around harmful OCD. And some compulsions may be avoiding sharp objects or things that could hurt them, or needing someone near them so that they don't harm themselves. The next one is pedophile OCD. And from the name, you can kind of see what it is, but the common obsession is unwanted thoughts about children, or harming children, or sexual thoughts about children. And some compulsions might be avoiding anything related to children, whether it's TV shows, parks, centers, anything related to or involving children, or even being around their own children if they have them. The last one is perinatal OCD. Now, this one is more of obsessions of unwanted sexual or violent thoughts about a newborn baby. It could be their baby or a baby, any babies in general, and fearing that harm will befall the baby. Let's say if they have a child and they fear that, oh, what if they stop breathing in their sleep? What if this happens to them or that happens to them? So this is something that they could obsess over. A compulsion of this is avoiding being around the baby, or constantly checking their baby's pulse to see, oh no, what if the baby's heart stops beating while they're sleeping? So they're constantly checking the pulse to see, like, okay, are they breathing? Okay, they're breathing now. And this information was found by on psychologytoday.com. And in our next one, some common treatments for OCD. There are various treatments for OCD, but a common treatment that counselors will use for this is cognitive behavioral therapy. And this has been shown to be the most effective approach with working with individuals with OCD. And with this, therapists will usually focus on exposure and response treatment techniques. So I also have a list here of the different techniques: exposure therapy, which is the most common one. And then we have imaginal therapy, which is also called visualization. This helps the client to work through some of the anxiety of some real world situations so they can move into the exposure therapy. We also have habit reversal training and cognitive therapy. And that concludes our slideshow. So now I kind of want to hear from our interns. What do you think after looking at the slides, or what things have you learned so far about OCD or have heard about this disorder?
Well, one of the things is that I really appreciated in the presentation is the distinction between OCD and other things that are more common, or I don't want to use the term normal, but things that may be more commonplace, like just being neat, or being having this likeness for being clean, so to speak. It's not the same thing. It doesn't equate to being OCD, and I think it's really important to distinguish that. Um, I remember when I started this program in clinical mental health, one of the things that professors would always say to us was, as you go about learning about the different disorders, some persons might tend to start to diagnose themselves or diagnose their family members or friends, and start thinking, oh my goodness, I have this and I have that, and my friend has this and that. But that's not the case, so it's really important to bear in mind the different criteria that would need to be met, as well as the important factors of meeting clinically significant distress and impairment in functioning and things like that, which are common features to all disorders. So I think that was really good too. to distinguish them.
That's good. Thank you. Hannah, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, truthfully, I before doing undergrad um, in psychology, I didn't know much about OCD, and the most I had seen about it would be from TV shows. They which are often inaccurate, the portrayal of OCD. And so I did appreciate that aspect of the PowerPoint as well because just similar to what Tracy Ann was saying, knowing the distinction between what it actually is and what it's not is crucial to avoiding harmful misconceptions to being formed around people who do have the disorder. And it's just important to know it so that you can help people that you may come across who have OCD. So
Thank you. Um, I also would like to share that if you have any questions on our Facebook Live, don't feel free to ask. Um, Feel free to pop a question there, and we'll try to answer it.
I would love also to, saving and open up a discussion also, like what OCD could also look like in COVID times, because I know with us having to wear masks and having to cleanse different places, a lot of people will also think that now that they're kind of following that ritual, they have OCD. And I want to make sure that we also kind of cover that a little bit, because I didn't also mention in our thing was distinction between OCD and general and anxiety. It used to be OCD, I believe, correct me if I'm not, OCD used to be under anxiety in the DSM-4, and now it's kind of been removed over to its own section with hoarding disease and trichomania. Um, there is the anxiety and the distress that is underneath COVID. I mean, underneath OCD, but it's anxiety has like the forthcoming worry and future-minded things, and OCD from that aspect is not always about the future-minded stuff or forthcoming stuff. It can also be what's in front of them, and it's also a strong unwanted distress and something that they cannot get rid of, and it's really hard with the what happens after their rituals or compulsions and them fighting it. And so there is a strong distinction between the anxiety and the OCD. So what do you guys think about that, from your own perspective?
And I think that's a good point that you raised, Alicia. I think, just again, just the importance of being able to accurately distinguish between what might be considered a disorder versus what might not be one, and also being able to accurately distinguish between different disorders, I think is really important. Because once we're able to do that, then we're better able to treat clients, knowing exactly what the root cause of their problem, their presenting problem is, then we'd be better able to know how to treat them for those different things. Although the treatment methods do overlap with certain disorders, but I think just being able to really accurately make that distinction again is just super important. And I think you made a very good point about COVID and the times that we're living in right now. I think that while it is that persons may develop let's I'm trying to avoid using the term normal, but while persons might develop a healthy um, caution towards keeping themselves clean and towards hygienic practices during this time of COVID, I think there are persons as well who might go to the other extreme, and just out of fear of getting COVID, or of other family members or loved ones getting COVID, then that can become unfortunately can spiral into OCD. So I think that's something that would also need to be monitored, and that's something that we kind of also need to keep in mind. And I think it's is correlated to a lot to thoughts. I love CBT, and I love the fact that you mentioned thoughts as well and how that links with behavior and so forth. And I think it is linked a lot to irrational thoughts sometimes surrounding different situations or things like that. And these irrational thoughts might not necessarily be founded on truth. So just being able to accurately know how you can get COVID, what might contribute to that, and how to properly protect yourself. It reminds me of like HIV/AIDS, when it became a big thing initially, and persons had all these misconceptions about how one could contract HIV/AIDS, and that led persons to developing this irrational and excessive fear about this thing that were based on these cognitive misrepresentations or biases that they had. So I think it's the same thing with COVID. Again, can be related to anxiety and can be as a result of these cognitive misperceptions that we might have. So being informed, accurately informed, is really important.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And that is very, very, very true what you brought up. Now, kind of also going with what we are discussing, I know Ashley kind of mentioned some ways and some treatments we can do for OCD. Do you guys have any idea other things that you would like to add, or practices that you've seen that have been helpful for those you've even come in contact with that had OCD?
Or read about.
I'm not really aware of any, but I do have a question about, the different therapies or treatments that are available to individuals with OCD. Um, I guess again, I haven't had personal experience with knowing someone who has OCD, but what is kind of like helpful advice to give to someone who has OCD but is unsure about seeking therapy or treatment? If you guys have any ideas or feedback about that.
Go ahead, Ashley. You.
Oh, I was gonna say one thing is psychoeducation, helping clients, even clients without an OCD, understand the benefits along with different potential risks of therapy, and having them understand a little bit more about what it is, what OCD is, and how they could benefit from the therapy or better understand what it is or what it is that they're dealing with.
Okay, so it overall would, just having that psychoeducation if you did have OCD is helpful because then you can learn how to manage it or deal with it is basically what I got from that. So it could be helpful in that regard. And within like the therapies that you guys did list, what are like, for example, the exposure therapy? Do you guys know like specifically how it does help individuals with OCD?
Alicia, do you want to share a little bit about that?
I'm gonna let you kind of explain a little bit, Ashley, since you presented on it.
Um, with exposure therapy, it is kind of like getting them exposed to different situations, helping them to interact with the just different situations and real life situations that they may encounter, and some of the anxiety that they may feel around that as well. I haven't had experience doing exposure therapy or seeing it, but I did see that it was a common treatment for individuals with OCD.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on what Ashley was saying, it's definitely exposing them to the to the situation that's causing them the obsession, and then kind of helping them with the a new habitation of rituals, and kind of helping them break free of the compulsions that they have from the obsessions. So it's exposure is just basically like what the name kind of gives you an idea of, just expressing them to the environment, the situation that's causing them the undue distress for their OCD. And then it's kind of breaking it down to where they're having control over the OCD, where the OCD is not controlling them in their life. I'm hopefully that answers your question, Hannah.
Yes, thank you. I like I said, I'm learning, which is why I'm glad I'm here to, learn more about the topic. So I was just curious as to how um, at least one of the therapies you guys listed works with that disorder. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And working with those who have OC, the first step always begins with just figuring out what you want to change. Also, like understanding like what in your life is causing you the stress, and sometimes it isn't always hard to pinpoint it because there's so many might be always so many variables, which is why coming and talking to a licensed professional is always the best thing. And I with these talks is we really want to make that something that's very common and normal just to get help, because mental health does have that negative stigma of, oh, something's wrong with you, and you're different, and different can be different, bad. But we all have our issues, we all have our challenges, and there's so much strength in coming and just talking to somebody, even admitting that you have a weakness. That's a strength. You don't always have to have everything together to be called strong. And OCD is one mental health issue that is definitely not always given as much light, and it's not always much discussed because some people, we can make light of it and use it as a common thing to describe somebody who has their life organized or to a point. Is there anything you'd like to add, Ashley, before we kind of wind down? Because I want to make sure that we don't leave anything out.
No, I think you covered that last bit pretty well. Did you guys have any other questions about anything in the presentation or anyone watching on our live?
No, I didn't have any questions.
I guess I'll add one more question. Um, so for someone who might not have a psychological background to OCD, um, what would you say, like, how can you be there for someone um, that has OCD? What's the best way to support them through what they deal with that?
Meeting them, I actually I cut you off. I make sure I didn't.
Oh no, I didn't say anything.
Meeting them where they are, because in the research we also noticed how it kind of creates compulsions when you try to stop them from what they're doing. So I think really just meeting them at the point where they are. If they're having these obsessions, if they're having these rituals that they're doing, you know, ask them, how can I help you? I see that this may be taking over your life, or you may feel like a part of your life is out of control. Like, what can I do for you? And then start there. And then I think just start working, then start building out from there and try and give them resources that could help them with that. We mentioned some treatment there. We can always go online and do our own research and look, how can we help someone who's dealing with OCD, and then kind of recommend, hey, let's go talk to a counselor, a psychologist. Let's go talk to somebody that is licensed in this, who has background in this, and then start getting them the help. Because I know, like, when we see an issue, we want to go in and be Superman. We want to, help them from the get go and give them all this stuff. But it can be also overwhelming, and it can deter them. So I think really just starting small, just as a friend, as someone who just wants to be there, be supportive, is a great start.
Mm. And a lot of times with this, just having someone or knowing that someone's just there for you can
Hmm.
be helpful as well.
Yeah, I really like what you guys have said. I think sometimes just showing up and being there is enough for what they may need to get through that, the difficulties they face. So that's really great. Thank you guys.
You're welcome. Okay, so if we don't have any questions, I want to thank everybody so much for coming out and for our third mental health talk. And Tracy, I want to make sure, did you have anything that you wanted to say? Anything?
Well, no, not really. I think you guys kind of already covered everything. Um, but just to remind those who may be viewing that we will be having another meeting next week, Sunday at this time. And the topic for that meeting will be Let's Talk About Suicide. The World Needs You. I think this is a really important topic, especially right now with the increase in suicidal rates and so forth with COVID and all the stressors that persons are experiencing. So I encourage everyone to come out and to listen to that presentation next week.
Thank you. I'm going to end our live recording.